It's the 17th century, and the Dutch Republic is developing at lightning pace. Cities are growing, and trade, the sciences, and the arts are all booming. The streets and the waterways must have been buzzing with activity. But with the world around him becoming ever more hectic, Vermeer chose to fill his two views of a city with his unique sense of stillness. Here we are, at the riverbank in 17th century Delft. We're looking northwards, across the water to the city. The riverside is quiet now, but it's still early, just after 7 a.m., according to the clock on the city gate right ahead of us. What a view! Look, there you can see the spires of the old church and the brewery, and next to it the orange roofs of the armory. Now we're back at the city gate, leading to the city of Schiedam. Crossing the bridge, we pass the new church, and nearby, the city gate leading to Rotterdam. Other artists love to show off with their paintings of grand buildings like these, but Vermeer took his own unique approach. He captured this entrance to the city in shadow, while the center is bathed in sunlight. The painting is divided into 4 bands: the riverbank, the water, the city, and the sky. The strip of buildings is quite narrow, but Vermeer brings it to life with color, texture, perspective, and light. This painting is almost like a photograph. The reflections of the buildings and the light in the water look so real. But this view is not quite so true to life as it looks, because Vermeer took some artistic license with the distances, sizes, and proportions. Uh-oh. Do you see those rain clouds? Let's go and find some shelter in the city. Welcome to the little street. Here too, there's no showy display of grand architecture. This is just a very ordinary house in a very ordinary street. The people living here are quietly going about their daily activities. People in those days spent their daily lives at the boundary of their home and the street. Do you see the detailing on the front of the house? The tiny bricks, the damage to the white wall, the cracks around the side entrance. As an artist, Vermeer was free to come up with completely imaginary scenes, but details like these make it as believable as it can be. Then Vermeer leads our gaze even further as we look through the gateway into the alley with brooms and a wash barrel where a woman is busy at work. Above her, we see the rooftops of other homes and a cloudy sky. Down below, meanwhile, the water from the barrel is flowing along the gutter towards us. Vermeer uses all these elements to create a powerful sense of space and depth. Using technical analysis, we've discovered that Vermeer originally painted an additional woman in front of the side entrance. He removed her later, though. He probably wanted to avoid blocking the view into the alleyway. Did you know that Vermeer painted a third view of the city? At some point in history it was sadly lost, but luckily there are lots more of his paintings left. In his early work, Vermeer often painted scenes of several people in an undefined space. After a few years, though, he struck out on a different path. For him, painting became a search for stillness, for his unique way of portraying people in their own surroundings. Shh, stay quiet. We don't want to wake her. This is the first painting in which Vermeer tried out his new style. Our eyes go straight to the young woman asleep at the table, but it's the details that tell the silent story. Do you see the glass on the table in front of her? I wonder what's in it. Wine, perhaps. I think we found out why she's taking a little nap. We're not the only ones who came to that conclusion, because in 1696, this painting went to auction with the title, "A Drunk Young Woman Sleeping." This looks like a still life. A bowl of fruit with a silver spoon, a white jug. Just a minute. The rug on the table has been pushed up. It's as though somebody just got up and left. I get the feeling this young woman just had company. In fact, there did used to be someone else in the painting. We found out using technical analysis that Vermeer originally painted a man and a dog in the back room, but he preferred the emptiness, so he changed his mind and painted over them. In that crucial choice, we see Vermeer taking his first step in the search for stillness. Come with me, let me show you more of his journey. There the woman stands, alone in a room, sunlight streaming through the window as we peer in, just a short distance away. What an intimate moment. I'm a little scared she might suddenly look up and catch us watching. This is Cupid. He was hidden behind a layer of paint for a long time, but he reappeared during restoration in 2017. It was as if the painting was revealing a secret. And talking of secrets, I wonder what's in that letter. Cupid knows more than he's telling, probably. Could it be a love letter? This still life looks a lot like the one on the table in the last painting. We've discovered that Vermeer originally painted a second chair in front of the table, but then he changed his mind and painted the green curtain over it. It looks like the curtains hanging from the frame of the painting. Have you ever heard of a trompe-l'œil? That's what we call an optical illusion painted by an artist. As well as looking very realistic, it makes the scene as a whole feel even more intimate. The young woman is the calm center of this quite full space. Vermeer had 11 children, so his home was never as quiet as this. Come with me. Let's go to the next painting. I bet you'll recognize it. Ah, there she is, the milkmaid. This is the high point in Vermeer's search for stillness. I'll explain why. Have you noticed how she stands out from the background? Vermeer used a trick for this. On the left, her clothing is light. On the wall behind is dark. And on the right, it's the other way round. This background didn't used to be as empty as it is now. Vermeer started by painting a jug rack on the wall and a large basket on the ground. But he changed his mind again to create a calm and restful atmosphere. So now the milkmaid, however quietly, commands all the attention in the room. Her gaze leads us to the task in which she is so completely absorbed. In the silence, you can almost hear the milk as it pours. I wonder what she's making. There's lots of bread on the table. I reckon she's making bread pudding. Wish I could have a taste. Vermeer set up the perspective by attaching thread to a pin pushed into the canvas. Can you find the pinhole? I'll help you. Look, just here, there's a tiny hole above her hand. The perspective makes it feel like we're sitting on a chair in the room, holding our breath as we watch her. Should we leave her in peace now? One thing I feel for sure is, for a moment there, we really got inside Vermeer's world of stillness. Vermeer loved to experiment with the composition of his painting, searching for a sense of calmness and intimacy. As time went by, though, he wanted more. He wanted to get under the skin of his subjects, so we would feel like we're truly entering somebody else's world. So he literally got in closer to the people he painted. Here again, we see a woman in a room, alone, reading a letter. But this is a very different painting. Do you notice we're much closer to her this time? And there are fewer distractions for her and for us. No curtain, no painting of Cupid, and even the window is out of view. Judging by the cool colour of the light and the blueness of the shadows, it must be early in the morning. And she's still wearing her bed jacket, something elegant women would wear when sitting up in bed. Has she just rushed from her bed to read this letter? We've obviously come at a very intimate moment. She's completely absorbed by the letter, her lips slightly apart, mouthing the words. She's holding the letter against her chest, bringing the writer even closer to her. Where might he or she be? Vermeer gives us very few hints, but is the map a clue? This painting is very different from the Milkmaid, where Vermeer used bold colours in a grainy style. Here we see smooth strokes, subtle transitions of colour, and pale shades of blue, ochre and grey. The clear blue jacket and orange ribbon on her breast pop out strongly, pulling our gaze towards the letter. I wish I could go in closer to look over her shoulder and see what she's reading. Vermeer wanted to get even closer too. Come with me and I'll show you how he did it. Cross, turn, cross. Turn, cross, turn. Lacemaking is painstaking, tricky work. Many girls in the 17th century learned how to make lace, so the fact that Vermeer chose to paint a young lacemaker is not particularly remarkable, but the way he did it certainly is. Most other artists painted lacemakers full length, like the woman we just saw reading a letter. But Vermeer was searching for the ultimate feeling of closeness. That's why we're getting even nearer to this lacemaker. It feels almost too intimate, don't you think? We're so close now that you can see the fine threads between her hands, clear as they can be. Hey, let's try something out. Focus your eyes only on those cotton threads. Now, try looking out of the corner of your eye at the red and white threads in the foreground on the left. Do you see that they're less in focus? This makes the sense of closeness to her even stronger. It's almost like we're bending over and looking at her fingers. Vermeer very consciously chose to make this slightly blurry effect using dots, lines, and thin, translucent layers of paint. He used this difference in focus to give a sense of depth. He was the only artist doing this at the time. She draws us in completely, just as she is totally drawn into her lacework. Cross, turn, cross. We've taken a few big steps backwards. Till now, we've often been up so close to the people in the paintings that our presence couldn't have gone unnoticed. In these paintings, though, Vermeer found ways of letting us watch in a less obtrusive way, turning us into distant voyeurs, or even intruders. The light's pouring through the windows, and the air is filled with music from the instrument played by the woman. Placing the musicians right at the other end makes this grand room look even bigger. And take a look at the beautiful marble floor. The pattern of tiles helps create a sense of distance, so the two people really look quite far away. Well, then we'll just have to get a little bit closer, won't we? This painting is known today as the music lesson, but we don't really know if that's what we're seeing. The man is listening closely, and it looks like he's quietly singing along. I wonder. I've never seen a music teacher like him before, wearing a sash and a sword on his hip. From behind, it looks like the young woman is concentrating on playing. But check the mirror, and you'll catch her throwing a glance at the man. In the reflection, her head actually seems to be turned more than you'd expect. Maybe there's more than just musical harmony going on between these two. Take another good look at that mirror, and you'll just be able to see the bottom of a painter's easel. Was Vermeer showing that he was actually present, that he really saw this scene? Or was it just a little artistic joke? That empty chair with a viola da gamba next to it feels like an invitation to join in. But I don't think we can match up to those two, so let's move on. You ready for some more music? The way this painting is composed looks a lot like the last one, but what we're seeing here from a distance is a proper house concert. How wonderful it is to make music together. We're quite far away from the group, and they don't seem to have noticed us. There's a feeling of distance that makes this scene all the more mysterious. Who are these people? What's their story? Judging by their stylish clothes and the marble floor, we must be in distinguished company. As we've already found out, the decorations in Vermeer's paintings often contain clues that help us understand it better. What about those two landscapes then? Perhaps they're comparing the beauty and abundance of nature with the way we experience music. This is where it gets really interesting. This is a painting of a real painting, showing a prostitute with a lute and a matchmaker negotiating with a potential customer. You can just feel the excitement in the air. Some painters like to make a link between music and love, and even eroticism. But Vermeer didn't do that here. He used this painting in a painting to create a contrast between the exuberance and physicality of the figures on the wall and the composed and focused musicians in the room. Despite the distance, this still feels like an intimate scene. Actually, maybe we should stop prying on them. Come on, it's time to go. I wonder what else we'll find. Mind out, it's dark in here. Hey, are we in a cupboard? No. There's a map on the left and a chair on the right. So I guess we're in a darkened room. The woman and her housemaid can't see us, but we can see them. Vermeer has made intruders of us, whether we like it or not. This level of separation feels kind of uncomfortable. But we're here now, so let's have a good look round anyway. Do you see that pair of slippers? They must mean we're looking from our hiding place into the woman's private quarters. That raised curtain increases the sense of detachment and distance between the rooms. This woman was just playing her sitar, but she's been interrupted by her housemaid, who's brought her a letter. I think we can guess what kind of letter it is. Just take a look at the painting on the wall. Artists would often compare the sea to love. They can both be stormy or calm, risky or safe. The ship is a reference to her lover. Though he may be far away, he's always in her heart. Maybe that's why the housemaid is answering the woman's questioning expression with such a meaningful look. I can't shake the feeling we're intruding here. I think it's time to leave our dark hiding place. Almost all Vermeer's paintings are set between the safe walls of a house, and many times he heightened the domestic atmosphere by hinting at an unknown outside world. Sometimes that hint appears in the form of a letter or a visitor, but more often he lets something of that world trickle in through a window. Well, it looks like they're really enjoying their conversation. The young woman looks very impressed by her visitor. She's not about to be distracted by anything, even the noises from outside drifting in through the window. His confident pose and impressive hat certainly make him look like a man of the world. Vermeer has given the outside world a place at the table in the shape of this man. Vermeer painted little dots and strokes of colour to build up the glass the woman is holding, and he used the same technique to bring her face to life. Her smile says it all. Vermeer portrayed the man as a lot bigger than the woman, but they're actually sitting very close together. It's an effect that draws us in even closer, till we're almost part of their flirtatious conversation. It's enough to make you blush. Let's go and cool off by the window. Did you know that Vermeer almost always positioned windows at the left side of his paintings? In this one, though, Vermeer does something that's unusual even for him, because of all the windows, this is the only one that gives us a little peek into the outside world. Those white tones look like they must be a cloudy sky, and the reddish hues of the bottom are the roof or front of a building. Do you see what I mean? The map on the wall is a reminder that there's a world outside this room. Let's go and discover other ways Vermeer brings the outside world into his painting. These two only have eyes for each other anyway. The housemaid is waiting patiently while the woman writes a letter. She'll probably go out later to deliver it. She's looking out of the window while she waits, smiling a little. Is she watching something going on out on the street? Or are her thoughts elsewhere? Something in the outside world is on her mind. The outside world is here too, in the form of a letter. The woman is absorbed by her writing. Vermeer rendered her clothing in a mosaic-like style, using almost geometrical shapes. How different this is from the housemaid in the last painting, made up of dots and strokes. What's that? There's something there on the floor. Well, I never. It's a crumpled up letter next to a broken seal and a stick of sealing wax. Has the woman just written a letter and then thrown it on the floor? The situation is getting ever more curious. Perhaps the painting behind her will give us a clue about what's going on. Here we see the baby Moses. After being abandoned by his mother, he was found by the daughter of an Egyptian pharaoh. She adopted the baby, but then unknowingly she appointed the real mother to care for him. Is it possible that this woman's life has also taken such a dramatic turn? It's a painting packed with mysteries that raise ever more questions. No matter, it's the mysteries that make stories exciting, isn't it? Especially when they're hidden in some silent gesture or little smile. So let's go and find more stories and mysteries. We often get our entertainment these days by looking at a digital window onto the world. But it used to be enough just to look out of a real window, peering at passers-by or watching neighbours as they went about their business. You could amuse yourself for hours, or in this woman's case, distract yourself. The room itself is rather dark, which intensifies the light from outside, shining directly onto the woman tuning her lute by the window, her books of sheet music lying on the table. Whoops! It looks like one of the music books has fallen to the floor. There's a viola da gamba lying near it in the shadow. This instrument appears in several of Vermeer's paintings, but it's never actually being played. Do you think she might be looking out for a visitor who's going to come and play it? The story told by this painting doesn't end with the scene in the room itself, though, because the map of Europe is telling us there's a whole wide world out there. The world outside is beckoning, and the woman is following it intently from her darkened room. A window such as this one opens up the painting and becomes a bridge to the outside world. But the paintings are themselves framed windows, offering vistas onto another painted world that's overflowing with stories, secrets, and in this case, lute music. Vermeer loved to paint pictures of letters, or rather women with letters, women filled with expectation, reading with bated breath, or a blush or little smile. Letters play a big part in 6 of his paintings. That's a 1/6 of all his known works. None of Vermeer's own letters has ever been discovered, but the letters that he painted have got plenty of tales to tell. Oh, she's noticed us. Luckily, it looks like she doesn't mind that we've interrupted her while writing a letter. She's even giving us a little smile. We'll have to make do with that because she's not giving anything away about what's in the letter. Vermeer did provide a little clue, though. Vermeer would often give hints like this one in his paintings, like the map and the picture of Cupid we saw in earlier chapters. We can make out the contours of a bass violin in this painting in a painting. I think that must be telling us something, because music was traditionally associated with love. Maybe that means this is a love letter. It would make sense, because letters were the perfect way for young lovers to get to know each other better, without parental supervision. In the 17th century, there were many people in the Dutch Republic who were able to read and write, and that meant there were plenty of opportunities for sending and receiving letters. Letter writing was a popular activity among distinguished ladies who liked working on them in a quiet room at home. This little tabletop chest is for storing her writing equipment. Perhaps she keeps secret letters in here too. Boxes like this were luxury products. This one was imported from Goa in India. Here it hints at a big, unknown world outside, a faraway place that young women like this one could only dream of. This woman was busy writing a letter, and now the maid has suddenly emerged from the darkness to bring her a letter. It looks like the maid is saying something. Are you getting the same feeling as me, that there's something very secretive going on? Exchanging letters wasn't just a simple pastime for sophisticated women in these days. It was a way of escaping a sometimes lonely existence stuck inside the house. Letters were a doorway to the outside world, to distant friends or secret lovers. This meant that some letters had to be passed on with great caution. That's where the maid came in useful, because she would go outdoors more often than her mistress. The maid would be able to discreetly deliver or pick up a letter while out on her errands. But what's in that letter? We do know that Vermeer originally painted something in the background that may have been a rug or a picture of several people. But in the end, he must have changed his mind because he chose this dramatic, dark background instead. So, no clues this time. Vermeer has perhaps given us the beginning of a story. He leaves the rest of it, and what's in the letter, to our imagination. Did the letter contain an important message, or secrets, or words of love? We will never know for sure. But maybe that's exactly what's so intriguing about a painted letter. calm we usually associate with Vermeer is being rudely disrupted by flashy, fashionable young men. They've come to charm the ladies with a supply of wine to hand. Modern themes like this became increasingly popular in paintings during the second half of the 17th century. Decency and good manners have made way for pleasure-seeking and seduction, with a little help from the wine. I'm guessing this fashionable man must have been in quite a rush to meet this woman because he's still got his cloak on, and it looks like he can't wait to refill her glass either. Take a look at how his cuff is framing the wine jug as he goes to pick it up. That's Vermeer's way of attracting our gaze. Now, I wonder what we can find out about the woman. That's quite some dress she's wearing. The red satin is decorated with bands of golden brocade, a silk fabric woven with gold thread. She's chosen to put on something really special for this visitor. This stained glass window is pretty classy too. It includes the family coat of arms. That means this must be the home of a distinguished family. I wonder what they think of this charming young fellow. Hey, look over there. It's a cittern. That's a stringed instrument, and music books. It must mean she's musical. Mind you, she has put them aside for this visitor. By the way, have you been wondering why there's so often a Persian carpet on a table in Vermeer's paintings? It's simply because they were so expensive that people didn't want them lying on the floor. It's a bit difficult to make it out, but the painting on the wall is of a cascading waterfall. Might that mean there are some intense feelings bubbling up here? It doesn't look like the woman is much impressed right now, but who knows how she'll feel after a glass of wine or two. No, you're not seeing double. This room really does look a lot like the last one. The atmosphere here is definitely more festive, though. It even looks like the woman is inviting us to come and join the fun. What do you think? Shall we join them for a glass? Look, Vermeer has used the cuff again to attract our attention. This time it's framing his fingertips, which are almost touching her hand. He's urging her with a sly smile to take a sip. Will she be tempted? She looks quite taken with this charming visitor, don't you think? You don't often see a big smile like that with teeth exposed in 17th century paintings. Actually, this kind of smile used to be associated with inappropriate behavior. Talking of inappropriate behavior, is that man in the corner sleeping? It looks like the alcohol must have gone to his head. There's also a dish on the table with leftovers in it. Maybe the woman first had a meal and a drink with this man, and now she's responding to the advances of the newcomer. On the wall behind this festive little group, there's a portrait of a distinguished-looking man dressed in an older-fashioned way. It's almost like someone from the previous generation is keeping a watchful eye on this happy but slightly unruly gathering. I think it's time to leave this party. Come with me. Vermeer painted this just a few years after the ones we've just seen. It's as though he were revisiting the same theme and composition, but going in closer this time. There are the carafe and wine glass on the table again, and there's a prominent place for music in this painting as well. The aging of the painting unfortunately means there's nothing left of the words on the sheet of paper they're holding. Perhaps they were the lyrics to a song. This comfortable housecoat is a very informal choice of clothing. Hang on, that looks like the type of head covering women wore in bed, known as a night kerchief. That could mean this man is by no means a stranger. What do you think she's trying to tell us? The look on her face is meant only for us. The man can't see her face because of the head covering. She's not the only one making eye contact with us, though. It's difficult to see the picture on the wall because of overpaintings and restorations, but it looks very familiar. Well, if it isn't our old friend Cupid, that must mean love is involved in this encounter. Maybe it's just me, but I think Cupid might be passing comment on this visitor's seduction skills. The man is also still wearing his cloak. He must have just arrived. That makes it a good moment for us to leave. Coming along? All these faces painted by Vermeer are as beautiful as the luster of a pearl, as mysterious as a headdress from a distant land. While they may look like regular portraits, they're actually a type of study painting known as a tronie. The sitters for tronies were often nameless, and the paintings are a blend of reality and fantasy. Powerful gazes and moist lips of the women bring a charged atmosphere of sensuality, even eroticism, to Vermeer's familiar stillness. There she is, the girl with the pearl earring. Quite the picture, don't you think? Her eyes meet our own with a piercing, perhaps mischievous look. She's beautiful with her smooth skin and slightly parted lips. Enchantingly beautiful. Her perfectly proportioned face and soft facial features are exactly what people found beautiful at the time. No wonder then that people later tried to discover her identity. But they were always on a hopeless mission, because it's likely she was mostly dreamed up by Vermeer. She's simply too perfect to be real. Her headdress looks like a Turkish turban. In the Turkish Empire, it was men who wore this kind of head covering. It's not the usual kind of accessory for a Dutch girl, but it's certainly mysterious. Her coat is a quite ordinary item of clothing for the period, but as far as we know, there weren't any dyed this ochre colour. That means it must also have been dreamt up by Vermeer. There is the piece of jewellery for which he is so famous. This huge pearl must have been very expensive. It's highly unlikely it actually belonged to Vermeer because he was still an unknown artist at the time. He probably painted it from an imitation pearl, or else used his imagination and painted it in just a few strokes. All these elements together make for a mysterious woman, a blend of fantasy and reality. I wonder what awaits us. Are you ready for some more eye-to-eye contact? This young woman looks more realistic. She's less perfect, with her high forehead and eyes set apart. This makes it feel more like a painting of a real person, but it's not. Portraits were paintings of real people in dignified poses, with expensive clothing and period hairstyles. Nothing like these tronie paintings by Vermeer. This time, there's no contemporary clothing at all. She's wearing a Roman-looking shawl and a classic-era scarf. So, is this a woman from ancient times? Not at all. Don't forget that this is a tronie portrait, and Vermeer wanted this young woman to appear timeless. That's why he gave her a pearl earring, which conflicts with the classical clothing. Her skin looks perfectly smooth and soft as velvet, very much in line with the beauty ideal of the day. She looks lovely, but real 17th century women could only dream of having skin like hers because smallpox was rife and many people's faces were pockmarked. Wait a minute, there's something missing. She's got no eyebrows or eyelashes. Plucking eyebrows became very popular in the 17th century, and artists sometimes simply left them out. This focuses all our attention on her kind eyes and amiable expression. Vermeer painted a dark background for this woman, just like for the girl with the pearl earring. I can say right now, that all changes in the other tronies coming up. Oh, it looks like she's surprised to see us. The room feels a bit cramped. This is an intimate moment. The chair she's leaning on is turned towards us. Is it an invitation to sit with her? Speaking of invitations, there's no denying that mysterious gaze we're getting from deep in the shadow falling on her face, her moist lips glistening in the light. This painting has been described in the past as romantic, partly because of the sensuousness of the woman. That doesn't surprise me at all. This young woman is also wearing unusual headgear. Hats were used to display in those days, and only men wore them. Women didn't wear them at all. Definitely not a German beret like this one. The young woman in the last painting was also wearing a shawl, but this one is made of heavier and more luxurious patterned fabric. The pearls in her ears are too big to be real. So once again, Vermeer has combined a variety of elements to create a fanciful tronie of a sensuous woman. This painting is unlike any other by Vermeer. It's as if he was wanting to experiment with different elements. Did you notice, by the way, the light is coming from the right side? You only see that in a few of his paintings, and the last tronie I want to show you happens to be one of them. And here's another entrancing woman waiting to see us. Well, you've had quite a bit of practice now, so go ahead. Try to find some of Vermeer's favourite elements for a tronie painting. And mind you, don't get distracted by this diverting woman. So far we've had an Eastern turban, a classical scarf, and a German beret. This time Vermeer selected another striking piece of headgear. A Chinese-style hat with contrasting stripes. Stripes became increasingly popular in the 17th century after European traders started returning from Asia with striped fabrics. Now that we've found the most unusual element, let's look for the more contemporary item of clothing. The jacket she's wearing is similar to others we've seen in Vermeer's paintings. This was quite a common type of clothing for women, who mainly wore them in the home. Perhaps she's just been playing her flute. Her lips are now slightly apart. Have you already noticed how this woman also has glistening lips and earrings, giving her an aura of sensuality? Now we've found all the elements that make Vermeer's tronie paintings so unique. He showed that eroticism can be more subtle than a bare breast or suggestive gesture. Here, the seductiveness lies in the mystery of an unknown woman, and shimmering pearls, of course. There are musical instruments to be found in more than a quarter of Vermeer's paintings. While some are shown carelessly placed aside, others are important elements of the work. Vermeer was in the last few years of his life when he made these 4 music-themed paintings. They each present an elegant woman playing music. But in these paintings, we are no longer an unnoticed, distant audience. Who doesn't love music? This woman is playing a virginal, a precursor to the piano. It was a very popular instrument. You would hear its bright tones in the homes of prosperous families. Do you see the paintings on the left and on the lid of the virginal? They're both of the same landscape. We know now that Vermeer copied it from a painting by a fellow artist named Pieter Antonisch van Groenewegen. It took 300 years and a lot of detective work to discover that fact. Have you ever heard of Delft ware pottery? These blue and white ceramics were popular around the world about the same time that Vermeer started painting. It's difficult to identify exactly what scenes are depicted on the tiles, but take a little distance and you instantly believe these are real Delftware tiles. Vermeer also made the marble floor look really convincing using a simple technique. Vermeer often used this technique. Take a look at the pearl necklace, for example, and the decorations on her dress. From close up, you can see the individual strokes, dabs, and dots, but when you look at them all together, they look so lifelike. Oh, look, there's Cupid again. Maybe the woman is waiting for a male musician to come and sit on the chair so they can make harmonious music together. Or is she hoping that we will join her for a duet? We don't have enough time right now, unfortunately. There's so much more for us to discover. Although we don't know for certain, we think this painting and the previous one form a pair of pendant paintings, two works that belong together. The two canvases are almost exactly the same size, and although one woman is seated and the other standing, both of them are playing a virgin. This is a viola da gamba, a large viola that's a bit like a guitar. The ways it's cropped in the foreground gives depth to the painting. This technique is quite normal to our modern eyes. We often see photographs in which only a part of an object is in the picture. But it was very unusual indeed in paintings of this period, because artists mostly showed all the elements of a scene completely, as if they were on a theatre stage. Vermeer was a firm believer in the saying, less is more. We saw evidence of that earlier with the tiles, the floor, and the dress. And the same goes for this sheet music, which looks very accurate from a distance, but the music staves are actually painted with quite rough strokes. Do you remember this painting of the prostitute, the matchmaker, and the customer? We've seen it before at the concert. Vermeer's mother actually owned this painting, or a version of it at least. Vermeer lived with his family in her home, so he was able to study it any time he wanted. The painting on the wall was probably intended to contrast with this exemplary young woman, because there are no visiting male suitors this time. But who knows, maybe someone will be coming along soon to play that viola da gamba. In some ways, this young lady looks like the other musical women, with her lovely curls, luxuriant robe, and pearl necklace. Yet she seems more relaxed than the others, as she sways to her own music. In this painting, we are seeing movement and spontaneity. This is exceptional in Vermeer's work, because he almost always chose to paint calm and quiet scenes. Let's take a closer look at that lovely guitar. Here again, Vermeer has used simple strokes and dots to make a very realistic impression, this time of the sound hole of the guitar. But what I'm more interested in showing you is the strings. Just look at how Vermeer has made them vibrate. This young woman isn't posing, she's really playing. Did you already notice that this is the same landscape used to decorate the lid of the Virginal in the last painting? This painting in a painting is a work by Peter van Asch, but Vermeer didn't copy it precisely. Although it looks totally realistic, the artist often adjusted reality a bit to make it work better in his paintings. We are so close to her that she must know we're here, but her attention is being drawn to something outside the frame. Might she even be blushing? I wonder who she's looking at. Once again, Vermeer is giving us a little hint of a story. We can decide for ourselves whether it's a family member, a music teacher, or maybe even a lover. What do you think? Is someone striking a chord with her? This time, there are no windows, decorations, or other musical instruments in the room, and nothing stands between us and this young woman. It's a perfect example of the art of omission. What remains is a woman seated alone at a virginal, and her calm gaze in our direction. The absence of all distractions means she gets all of our attention. You could almost forget to look at the wall behind her. There's no painting there this time, but there's still something beautiful going on. Just look at how naturally the light is falling across the rough wall. There's the characteristic calmness again, the open gaze, and yes, I can even spy a pearl necklace. That's enough elements to make us immediately think of other paintings by the artist. But for a long time, there were doubts about whether this was a genuine Vermeer. That was mostly because of the yellow shawl. The colour itself wasn't the problem, because Vermeer used yellow in other paintings. It was the technique used to paint the shawl that gave rise to doubts, because his work was much more refined in other paintings. But nowadays we are satisfied that this young woman really is by Vermeer. Paintings of scientists and scholars were popular in the 17th century, but Vermeer only made 2 of them himself. Here he shows his geographer and astronomer in the intimate surroundings of their studies, poring over maps and globes. They're using their instruments and knowledge to bring the world indoors, where they have the peace and quiet they need to study the heavens, the earth, and everything in between. Here is the astronomer, so preoccupied with his work that he doesn't even notice us. Just look at all those instruments, maps, and books. The whole world is within his reach. And using his fingertips, he carefully navigates to the place he wants to be. This is a hands-on, practical part of his work. And this is no ordinary globe of the Earth. It's a celestial globe. And there at the top left, you can see the Great Bear constellation. The light from the real world floods in as the astronomer studies the heavens and the earth. Do you see how Vermeer is playing with that idea? The light passes across the globe, caressing the scholar's hand and illuminating his face. It's like Vermeer is showing us how the astronomer gains his insights. Behind the cloth on the table, there's an astrolabe, an instrument for measuring distances between stars. And if I'm seeing it right, the book is open at a drawing of exactly the same instrument. Just imagine how precisely Vermeer must have worked to paint that. Some people saw the life of a scholar as a lonely one as they surveyed the world without leaving their study. Even though they were surrounded by the books of prophets and philosophers, they were still all alone in their work. Vermeer saw them very differently, though. He thought of scholars as true men of the world. So, would you like to come and meet the geographer? The geographer and the astronomer belong together and are known as a pendant pair. Both paintings show scholars at work, absorbed by their research. Vermeer painted the one soon after the other and cut the canvases from the same piece of linen. Look up there, on top of the cupboard, another globe. Globes were always produced in pairs. The astronomer has the celestial globe, and the geographer the terrestrial globe. So they also link the 2 scholars. One shows the heavens and the stars, and the other our planet. And this, by the way, is the Indian Ocean. There's also a map on the wall. Let's have a look. There's the boot of Italy, southern France, Spain, and even a bit of North Africa. In combination with the globe, the map shows that the geographer wanted to study the whole wide world, not just part of it. Do you remember how Vermeer showed the astronomer physically engaged in his work? At first, Vermeer also showed the geographer in a more active pose, with his compass and head pointing towards the parchment paper. Later, he changed his mind choosing instead to show the geographer deep in contemplation. Are his thoughts taking him to some place on the other side of the world? The geographer and astronomer are exceptions in Vermeer's work. These are the only paintings in which the artist focused on male subjects like this. I wonder what they will discover on their mental journeys to faraway places and other planets. Let's go and let them continue their studies. Vermeer was a Protestant Christian, and to marry Katharina Bolnis, who was Catholic, he had to convert to Catholicism. In the years that followed, he threw himself into learning about the religion and made these 4 paintings centering on faith and inner values. The highlight of the 4 paintings is Vermeer's symbolic work on the theme of religious faith, known as an allegory. Here we find a woman dressing herself up, admiring herself in the mirror as she puts on her pearl necklace. But we actually need to look at her through the pious lens of the Catholic faith. Now we see her as a woman who symbolizes earthly sins, such as vanity and temptation. She has a comb, a powder brush, and a washing bowl, all things she uses to beautify herself. There was a lot of writing on matters like this in the period, and this painting is also a warning, because what needed to be clean and pure was not your outward appearance, but your soul. It was seen as better to busy yourself with God than with pearl necklaces. It's very dark here. Catholicism teaches that religious faith is a friend in the darkness. But if, like this woman, you are stuck in earthly darkness, you won't see the light, or in other words, God. Vermeer initially painted a map on this wall, then decided against it. Perhaps he wanted to make the composition as a whole more restful, or to focus more on the real subject here of earthly sin. Just a minute, though. The way the sunlight is shining on the bare wall is really very beautiful. Could it be that Vermeer is invoking the light of the divine here? That would bring real meaning to this empty wall. The woman herself isn't picking up on any of this. She's way too busy admiring herself to have any consideration for God. Here again we find ourselves in a darkened room. We know what that means now. And again, there's an elegant woman at a table with a mirror on the wall. Though in this case, she's not giving it any attention. She's absorbed in her own thoughts, waiting for the weighing scales to balance. When you look at all that on the table, there are gold chains, strands of pearls, and gold and silver coins. She must have just taken them out of her jewelry box. But don't let yourself be distracted by all those glittering riches, because this painting is also a warning. It's telling us that this is not the right way to behave. But Vermeer does show us a way out. The theme of the painting behind the woman is Judgment Day, when the chosen ones rise up to heaven and sinners descend into hell. This figure of Archangel Michael is often placed at the center of this type of scene, where he weighs up the sins and virtues of each person. Vermeer has put this woman, with her scales, in his place. But this too seems to be a warning, because she should be weighing her choices in life, not pieces of gold and silver. It's still not too late to bring everything into balance and choose for God. She seems unaware of the important message behind her. But now we have found the sin and the escape route, let's see where they take us. Unlike other artists, Vermeer didn't portray his female subjects as typical women of the house, with children and a hectic domestic life. The 4 women in these 4 paintings transcend all that and have religious connotations. There's a jewellery box on the table in this painting, too. Can you spot that tiny strand of a pearl necklace and the blue lint? It's yet another reminder of the sin of vanity that was so strongly rejected by Catholic doctrine. This woman has little interest in her jewellery. Deep in thought, she has even turned away from the table. After showing us the sin and the escape route in the last painting, here Vermeer shows us another way out, through purity and cleanliness. The ultimate goal was purity of the soul, and the perfect example of this was the Virgin Mary. Her immaculate conception was often represented in paintings by rays of light, and water symbolizes cleanliness. Do you see what I mean? This is exactly what Vermeer is doing with the window and the water picture, and she is grasping both of them. Let's take a closer look at this. Do you see how the silver pitcher and bowl are built up only from the reflections of the surrounding colours? Blue, ochre, red and grey. That is a really skillful piece of painting. The three paintings so far have shown us the most important values of the Catholic faith. Now, I think you're ready for the fourth and final painting. This painting is crammed with Catholic symbols. Vermeer must have thoroughly immersed himself in the doctrine. It so happens he had neighbours who belonged to the Jesuit Catholic religious order. They would have been able to help him, I'm sure. Being familiar with the religious literature is one thing, but how do you go about making a painting about a faith? Vermeer had a handy guide for precisely that, called the Iconologia, by an aesthete named Cesare Ripa. He used symbols to illustrate intangible concepts. Let's see which ones we can find here. Look, there's the apple from which Eve took a bite. That's a reference to the sins of humankind. Next to it, there's a cornerstone from the foundations of faith that has crushed the snake. This shows how good conquers evil. This woman is resting her foot on a globe of the earth. She's a symbol of religious faith, which is victorious over all earthly concerns. She's also showing us that the place to find true faith is in your heart. So the symbols are telling us a story. Her gaze ultimately leads us to this glass sphere. Strangely enough, there's nothing about this in Cesare Ripa's guide to Catholic symbols. Vermeer's Jesuit neighbours probably helped him out with another book about sacred emblems, in which he found a Latin motto about the glass sphere. Capit quod non capit, meaning it captures what cannot be captured. Vermeer used all these symbols to give richness and depth, but it is the glass sphere that takes the painting into the infinite realm of the divine. Now we're going deeper into Vermeer's early career to better understand his paintings. He was an ambitious young artist who still had to find his way. He explored the genre of history painting to tell stories from the past and made these 4 large works ranging from a biblical story to a brothel scene. Searching for a style that suited him, Vermeer experimented with light, perspective, and theme. Even the greatest painters need to practice, to make mistakes and learn. So, as a young man, Vermeer wanted to make history paintings of religious, mythological, or historical scenes. That's not surprising, really, because history painters had the most prestige at the time. This painting was one of his first attempts. It's also the biggest painting he ever made. The woman at the back, Martha, is serving Jesus, while also reproaching her sister Mary, who has only come to listen to him. Jesus is pointing out to Martha that she, like Mary, should regard matters of the spirit as most important. It's sometimes difficult to find Vermeer's signature on his paintings. This one wasn't found until 1901. Look, there it is. right at the end of the bench. At first, art experts couldn't believe that this was a genuine Vermeer. But they soon realized that it was simply the proof that Vermeer's early paintings were very different from his later ones. But there are similarities too. Just look at their faces. It looks like Vermeer was already totally fascinated by light and shadow. It took time for Vermeer to become a master painter. Here we see him struggling a bit. The layout of this narrow corridor is puzzling, for example, with its poorly defined passages and openings. Something's gone wrong here as well. The floor behind Maria's bench flows seamlessly into the wall. I'm thinking that combining different spaces in one painting wasn't Vermeer's strong point. We don't know whether Vermeer himself was unsatisfied with the end result, but after this he never painted more than 2 walls of the inside of a room again. Maybe that says enough. The Roman saint Praxedes and her sister Prudentiana took care of the bodies of Christian martyrs who had given their life for Christ. Here we see her using a sponge to mop up the blood and squeezing it into the metal container. Vermeer based his painting of Praxedes on a work by the Italian artist Ficcarelli. He didn't make an exact copy, however, and he added elements such as the crucifix in her hands. We know that there were no pictures of Praxedes outside Rome, but Vermeer must have seen the Ficcarelli painting to be able to copy it. But where? Vermeer probably spent most of his life in the city of Delft, but perhaps he went travelling to broaden his horizon. Vermeer's love of painting didn't simply appear out of the blue. His father was an art dealer, so growing up he must have seen a lot of paintings. And there we have the signature that the experts just couldn't agree about. Is it really Vermeer's signature? Or did somebody else put it there years later? Research has now shown that it was not placed by somebody else at a later date. We do know that Vermeer converted to Catholicism and was in close contact with the Jesuits in Delft, and this version of Praxedes, with the added crucifix, fits in perfectly with that. Did the Jesuits commission Vermeer to make this painting? We simply don't know. Diana, the Roman goddess of the hunt, was a popular subject for artists. They usually painted her in a scene from either the myth in which Actaeon stumbles upon Diana while she's bathing, and she transforms him into a deer, or the one in which the pregnant nymph Callisto is cast out. But this is no mythological scene. Is it a hunt, then? No, there are no bows and arrows and no hunting spoils in sight. And that dog's certainly no bloodthirsty hunting hound. Diana and her company are simply relaxing together. This too was a popular theme for painters. Vermeer initially painted this woman turned and facing outwards, suggesting an extrovert character. In the end, he changed his mind and painted the woman gazing downwards. This transforms the whole scene, making it introverted, like many of his later paintings. At one time, there was a bright blue sky visible in the background. Researchers discovered Prussian blue pigment in the paint, but it didn't even exist in Vermeer's time. So somebody else must have painted the sky in. The researchers wanted to restore the painting, but they knew that if they removed the blue paint, they would damage the underlying layers. The only solution left was to paint over the background again, this time with dark brown paint, just like in the original. And now, just as Vermeer intended, the atmosphere is again serene. You'll be used to hearing that word by now. This painting was a step towards the serene calm that Vermeer would later capture in his paintings many times. This time there's neither a myth nor a Bible story. We're watching a financial transaction taking place in a brothel. Have you noticed the difference between this painting and the other ones? We're already getting closer to the scenes from daily life that Vermeer would paint later on. In this painting, everything revolves around the shiny coin in the man's hand. He's paying the woman for the services she will provide once she's been paid. On the left, we see the matchmaker, or curer, grinning as she watches on. I'm sure she's going to get her share of the proceeds. But who is this man? He seems keen to meet our eye. This is the first Vermeer painting in which this happens. And as we've already seen, direct gazes like this appear many times in Vermeer's later work. The man's pose and expression suggest this is a self-portrait. But unfortunately, we'll never know if it really is Vermeer. We simply don't know what he looked like and have nothing to compare this picture with. Here again, we see Vermeer struggling with perspective. We're looking at the people from low down, but viewing the tabletop from higher up. Vermeer changed course after this painting. He was done with the history genre, and from then on he almost only painted domestic scenes on smaller canvases. Maybe his customers' tastes had changed. Or was it just that these calm and tranquil settings suited him better? What do you think? There aren't many paintings that have been talked about as much as this one. We see an artist, perhaps Vermeer himself, at work. But there's a whole lot more to this painting. He really pulled out all the stops this time, using composition, lighting, and symbolism. The result is Vermeer's very own allegory on painting. We kept the high point of his artistic career till last. When you're painting, you at least need some brushes, oils, and a palette. But they're nowhere to be seen. And who would choose to paint wearing such expensive clothes? And on a precious marble floor, too. This isn't the reality. This is a symbolic, idealized world. And here, the Iconologia Guide to Symbols comes in handy again. The woman's got a laurel crown on her head, and a trumpet and a book in her hands. So that must be Clio, the muse of history. The artist is busy painting the laurel crown. Let's look it up in the Iconologia. Here it is. The crown stands for fame and eternal life. Is that what Vermeer, like so many other painters, wanted to achieve through his art? But Vermeer's life was not to be eternal. He died in 1675. By that time, he was well known, but far from famous. The family was left with substantial debts, and his wife, Katharina, had to sell lots of her possessions. She tried to protect some assets from creditors and gave this painting to her mother for safekeeping. Why this painting in particular? An impressive work like this would have been worth a lot of money, but the emotional value was probably far greater. Could Katharina see her own husband in this painting? In a way, we know we're seeing the master painter himself because everything comes together in this work. His talent, his unique style, his fascination for light, and his feeling for atmosphere. It's these qualities that ultimately made his dream come true. Johannes Vermeer did indeed become world famous and immortal. This is the final stop on our journey of discovery. If you'd like to find out more about Vermeer's life and paintings, dive deeper and explore the hidden stories, or else go to the gallery and examine all the paintings for yourself. Zoom in and explore the paintings close up, or make your own collages using details from them. Immerse yourself. Get deeper into the painted world of Vermeer. Who knows what you'll discover?